Philosophically, transactional analysis is very humanistic.
Hmm.
And of course, from its theoretical conception, is highly psychodynamic. And of course, from its methodology and its outcome-based approach, it is very, very cognitive behavioral.
So hello everyone, welcome to a fresh new episode of Inside Out with Soumya. Today's conversation revolves around transactional analysis, a refreshing school of thought in mental health that is getting more and more attention these days and the past couple of years by both mental health and non-mental health professionals. Today, we're going to be talking about what transactional analysis is, what's unique about it, and why you should be taking interest in it. Some of its foundational and fundamental concepts, and definitely the applications. And for that, I am thrilled to be joined by two remarkable guest speakers today, each bringing a wealth of experience in their own distinguished fields. A quick Google search of their names will reveal the treasure trove of their individual accomplishments, personal ventures, as well as numerous noteworthy collaborations and affiliations. So knowing their rich background, a part of me is a little nervous to talk to them, but a bigger, major part of me is absolutely excited. All in all, it's truly an honor to have both of you here today. So welcome, Gunjan and Surya. How are you?
Thank you so much, Soumya, for having us.
Thank you, Samya. I'm really looking forward. Thank you for being here.
Me too. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of interesting conversations. But before anything else, let's get our listeners acquainted with who you are as individuals and especially your affiliation with transactional analysis. So whoever would like to take the lead and going ahead with the introduction, please do so.
Okay. All right, let me go first then. My name is Gunjan Zutshi, and I'm a CTA psychotherapy, which is Certified Transactional Analyst Psychotherapy. My specialization is in that. And my association with TA has been since 2004. When I first attended the international conference, which was being organized in Bangalore. And that's where I first met Surya and some of the colleagues. I don't think Surya remembers me from that conference. And then of course, later he was also my trainer, my first trainer, when I started my learning journey in TA. So yes, it's been a long association, Soumya. And it's been a very valuable association with the methodology, the fraternity. I think the colleagueship that TA colleagues have offered over the years. So very briefly then, as a psychotherapist, I have a private practice in Bangalore. And I see clients in one-on-one therapy as well as group therapy. Of course, I had a prior occupation before I became a psychotherapist, and I continue to do that, which is work in the field of organization development. And I have a consulting firm, which I co-founded with a colleague. So right now, I would say three things in life, really, where my focus is: TA, yoga, and group relations. I think these three really define the work that I'm doing in whichever field I am in. So very happy here to be then talking about, I think, one of deep abiding themes in my life, both personally and professionally.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that introduction, Gunjan. I myself being a yoga enthusiast, I'm delighted to hear that from you.
Then maybe we should talk one day about yoga and TA and
oh, definitely. I'm already taking mental notes.
Yeah.
Thank you. On to you, Surya.
Hi, Samya. My name is Suriyaprakash, and of course, you call me Surya. I'm an teaching and supervising organizational transactional analyst as Gunjan is specialized in the psychotherapy field of TA. I'm specialized in the organizational field of transaction analysis. I'm based out of Coimbatore. I am a professor and area chair of organization behavior and human resource in Janssen School of Business. And I also have a private practice as a transaction analyst and an OD facilitator through my institute called Relations, where we provide organizational training, coaching, counseling, and consultancy and facilitating services. My association with TA started exactly 30 years back, in 93 actually. And it was the result of a series of accidents. I can go on with long stories, maybe some other day when we talk about it, where I attended even before I did a basic course, I attended a TA conference, an international TA conference in Chennai, because some of my friends were going there. That is when I met one of the trainers from the UK who was running a workshop, for 2-day workshop actually. And I was so fascinated by what I learned there. It was an organizational application of transactional analysis. So I went and asked her, okay, what do I do if I want to learn further about this? And that is how she introduced me to P.K. Saru, who's considered as the mother of TA in India. All of us, Gunjan and I, have all been trained with Saru. So it took someone from the UK to come and introduce me to someone who was literally living,
next door.
Yeah. So that is how it started in 93, 94. And ever since, of course, I went on to do my first level of certification, which is a certified transaction analyst. And then I further continued to complete my next level, that is highest level in TA certification, that is being a teaching and supervising transaction analyst. So since then, from 2010, I've been offering advanced training in transaction analysis as well, wherein we prepare people for the international certification as certified transaction analysts in the organizational field and other developmental fields of TA as well. And yeah, it's been a fascinating journey. And the most exciting part about this whole is, of course, the theory itself, but most importantly, the people that I came with, I network with, not only in India, but also in our South Asian region, and more so in the international level. And that is how, way back in 2001, almost as early as that, I got engaged in the organizational aspect of transaction analysis also, where I joined the International Transaction Analysis Association on various of its committees and then on its board. I served on several years on the board, and until 2016, I stood down as the president of the International TA Association. And after a gap of 6 years, it was so tempting. I'm again on the board as a vice president, professional standards of the International TA Association. And I'm also quite pleased, and I would say I'm proud and honored to be one of the founding members of SATA. We formed SATA, and I was one of the founding secretary. I served as secretary for a long, long time until last year. And yeah, now I'm one of the trustees of SATA, and I'm also a member of SATA. And that is something quite fascinating for me, being part of this community, wherein we have, in a way, a homogeneous group, because the common thread being transaction analysis. But in a way, it's also a very diverse and heterogeneous group, because we have counselors, therapists, educationists, managers, organizational people, executives, coaches, people, all those apply transaction analysis in their work, and of course on themselves as well. So that is something quite fascinating. And right now in my life, as Gunjan was saying 3 things, I was also sitting with 3 things, which is really significant for me. Transaction analysis, which is main part of my identity, both personal and professional. And Vedanta, thoughts and studies, is something that I'm very attracted to, and I'm looking at the commonalities and how it is relevant to the current times, and also long distance running.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow, I'm already feeling inspired by everything both of you are bringing in. And all the affiliations that you mentioned with the SATA, the Southeast Asian Association of Transactional Analysis, and the international one as well. That's all volunteer work, right? Oh, wow. Extra 100 more brownie points to all of you for taking that time and energy out from your busy schedules and really giving in. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, that is integral part of the whole philosophy of TA. For me, that is in a way living the philosophy of TA, wherein that all of us are okay and all of us choose our destiny, and therefore it comes from a space of joy, and also from a space of what I consider as conscious reciprocity.
Mhm.
I strongly believe when we give, we tend to get a lot as well. So that is something quite, that's where the energy comes from. So,
Definitely. In that one statement, I saw the amalgamation of tea and Vedanta as you just was talking. Lovely, lovely. We've already got the ball rolling. So let me also introduce my affiliation with TA. So as of now, I am in the second year of training. So I'm a trainee right now. And so I feel like a little baby talking to both of you. And also I'm so psyched that I get to hear all of these insights today. Yeah. And as we're talking about tea and both of you are sharing your deep, committed admiration for tea. I think that is that one thread that is connecting the three of us together today as well. What's always made me chuckle though, really cracks me up sometimes is how transactional analysis, which we'll be calling TA for the rest of our conversation, sounds like something like a tool that a chartered accountant would use, like tally, transactional analysis. There you compute some number and do something with it. But at the same time, if you look at just those two words and elaborate those two words, the connection between them, we can actually describe what the theory is about. What do you both think about it?
yeah, I was thinking, immediately an anecdote comes to me. It's a frequent anecdote because I do a lot of transactional analysis workshops and trainings in corporate environments. So I still remember vividly in one of those group when we were talking about expectation setting and contracting in the beginning of the session, one guy he was from the finance department, he said, I'm really sitting here wondering what you're going to teach me about travel allowance for 2 days.
Travel allowance for today.
Because the only TA that
Yeah.
knew was travel allowance. So invariably, every group, wherever there are some people in finance, they'll come up with saying, because it's basically, transactions is one, the immediate transaction, any common person comes up to our mind is the financial transactions.
True.
Possibly that is where Eric Berne also got the idea in the 50s or 60s in terms of the physical and financial transactions that takes place between goods and money and so on from people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is a brilliant philosophy behind what he did. Historically, if you look at it, he developed transaction analysis sort of a rebellious, stream from the then possibly only available methodology of psychotherapy, which was psychoanalysis. So, so he said, which takes long years and then a lot of money and still is not goal focused in terms of, it does not specify exactly what the client is looking for or what the client will gain from the whole engagement and so on. So he developed this as, counter movement, I would even say at that time, where he said, I want my clients to be focused in terms of the result and the outcome. At the same time, clients need to be in an empowered space, relating at an equal level with the therapist. And I don't want some abstract notion of progress, insight that the client will be sitting left with. I want something very observable. And I think that is where he was also, in a way, tapping into the scientific temperament of the analytical approach during that mid-20th century, which was very much there. So, in a way, he beautifully summarized it. It's not exactly the words that he said, but he said, the purpose of transaction analysis is to understand what is going on intrapsychically, that is within the person, from something that is observable, which is what is going on outside, that is between people. So here we are referring to the transaction that takes place when people communicate or relate. By analyzing that, I could get insight in terms of what is probably the individual is sitting with and what is probably happening between people, not only as a dyad, but also in a group. So that is how we even defined it as a social psychiatry. So that was a very brilliant, idea, and way path-breaking at those times in the mid.
Quite radical.
Yeah, very radical. Yes, Gunjan?
As you were talking, Surya, I was reminded my first knowing about TA was, of course, in an organization behavior book, where they talk about TA as one of the methodologies you can use for team building and, in an organization context. And of course, then I read the book, I'm Okay, You Are Okay, which I think, popularized TA, but also maybe made it into bit pop, which it is not. Which it is not. I think Berne came from very strong roots in psychoanalysis. He was a psychiatrist himself. And his theories, and I think people in TA community who've come after him have really added to the theory. So today it's a very rich theory which spans across, at least in psychotherapy field, from psychoanalysis, having taken birth from it in some sense, to what came later as to be known as cognitive behavioral therapies, because there's a big part of that which TA offers as a methodology. But I think its real significance is in putting the client at the center of the therapy and empowering the client, which is very humanistic existential approach, which is the new age therapies really of centrality of the client. Yeah.
Oh, you beautifully said, Gunjan, like the collaboration that Surya also mentioned. TA is not something that is done on or to a client, it's done with the client. And that the collaboration, the equal pathways that we build with the clients is such an essential part of it. And even sometimes, so having had a background in psychology, I did all my training, bachelor's, master's in psychology. We often use terms like, let's process this. And I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? There's always been a vague air around it. When I came to TA, and as I have been learning more and more, I'm actually getting the essence of what it means when it comes to therapy with the client specifically. Similarly, TA has given me so much understanding. And like I was reading in a book, the common ways we describe TA helps understand why someone thinks, feels, and behaves the way they do in a nutshell. And isn't that what we're all looking for? Be it within mental health or outside of it, every human being is striving for that understanding in their personal relationships, sometimes in the professional field, all of that. And it's so interesting that Eric Berne, drawing in those early era, was actually courageous enough to break from that psychoanalysis and integrate all of these theories to come up with his own. That's amazing. And I'm wondering, what else do you find fascinating about Eric Berne as a person who's a pioneer of this theory?
I think the cheek and tongue writing. One of my favorite quotes from Berne is about insight is not enough. And saying, hey, you can have all the insight in the world, but what are you going to do about it? And for psychotherapists, his advice was work with the client as if this is the last session you're going to do. So you're constantly thinking about how can you help the client bring about some change. It's so I always hold that in mind when I think about working with clients. So yeah, I think quite a remarkable, phenomenal man. And Surya, probably you have more to add to that.
What stands out for me is, is audacity And also it's quite ambitious in terms of wanting to, understand and explain, describe the whole gamut of human life in a way. Because he wrote about the individuals, the interpersonal, the interpsychic, group, organization, all this, I think within a span of what, about 20 years, I think that's all it is. Because he died, unfortunately, pretty early, when he was 60. But within that, he gave, he really sowed the seeds of the whole spectrum of human life. And of course, he left the rest for others to follow. And as Gunjan said, there were some real pearls in some things that he said, which, really hits the nail on its head. For example, about the other metaphor of the Occam's razor.
Say that again.
Occam's razor, where
Okay.
it talks about, if you could say something shorter, then don't do it. You don't have to simply write things, elaborately, superfluously, just because, it looks beautiful or something.
I think I would
Definitely.
add one thing to it, Soumya. I think he was ahead of his times.
Mhm.
The foundational philosophy of TA that people are okay, which is very core, right?
Mhm.
Is really what all of the later humanistic, person-centered, positive psychology is really based on that. I'm not saying based on that, but the idea that people are okay, whereas a previous way of thinking was there is pathology that has to be, there's something wrong.
Yeah, that has to be corrected.
That has to be fixed.
Mhm.
Versus saying no. And, again, one of Berne's favorite saying, famous saying that we are all born prince and princesses.
Yeah.
We turn into frogs.
Absolutely.
And even as I'm saying it, it gives me goosebumps to really say, we all are full of potential. So I think that's the other thing which stands out for me about TA, about Berne, this centrality of okayness, the power that it just is hidden.
Mhm.
You just have to find ways of bringing it out. It
Definitely.
doesn't question it. That is it there?
True, true.
Yeah.
That is quite deep, when he says that people are born okay or as prince and princesses. And along the way, things happen, life happens.
Yeah.
And then that journey starts to go back to a place of okayness. That is definitely way ahead of its time. And I'm glad he was, because today here we are utilizing it in our everyday life, in our professional lives. And while Surya, you were talking about what was that razor again?
Occam's razor.
Occam's razor. I was thinking that yes, Berne said that. And here I am writing a 8,000 word diploma in my second. It's all in good humor.
I know. And he was a prolific writer. He
Yeah.
wrote so-
Well, we all have our paradoxical ways of being. Right. It's so nice to hear from you folks about what your thoughts are. And it's so important to understand the art from the perspective of the artist. We cannot just remove Eric Berne from transaction analysis, what he brought into it, what was his way of thinking. And yet, what comes to my mind is right now, the three of us, we are absolutely loving transaction analysis, right? Yet there are these schools of thoughts like cognitive behavior therapy, psychoanalysis, REBT, which have been sort of the big players since a very long time. If I'm being absolutely honest, during my graduation, undergrad and masters, there was no mention of TA. Yeah, we just read all of these theories that we've been reading since years and years. And yet, thankfully, one of my professors was a practitioner and he introduced us to the concept, right? So right now, as we're talking about it, why do you think anyone should take interest in transactional analysis?
I think what TA offers is a way of thinking that's what Surya meant, I think, when you said meta theory, right? Because TA the applications are in 4 different fields, right? While Berne was a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, and most of his writing was in therapeutic setting, eventually TA grew to have its application in the field of counseling, in field of education, and field of organization development, in organizations. So I think it is a broad theory, which lends itself to application in many, many areas, which are developmentally oriented. So whether education, counseling, organizations, and their development. And within that, then it also has enough to offer, in that specific field, there is enough depth to really then go deeper. So I would say that is one thing why someone should really consider TA, and I can talk about from psychotherapy perspective, and maybe Surya, you can add more from organization bit. Within psychotherapy, the growth has been, from classical TA, which is how Berne developed the theory, into what came to be known as redecision model, integrating work from Gestalt and Fritz Perls' work, and Goulding. So bringing that in to later more, like I said, as the humanistic principles became bigger and took more central stage, the integrative TA. And now I think the shift has been towards working in a relational way, which is actually a big shift that's happening within psychoanalysis, right? That moving from the biological drive sexual theory to really a theory of, that it is about relationships and what happens in relations, so relational psychoanalysis, right? So it offers all of that to someone who wants to be a psychotherapist using TA. It's not then defining you as I can only do CBT, or I can only do REBT, or I can only do some other form of therapy, IPT or movement. So it really gives you a whole spectrum of ways to think about clients, ways to work with clients. And, I always feel it is also personal to us, right? Something appeals to me. Why I would become a CBT therapist is because something in CBT appeals to me. Why I would become a psychoanalyst or a psychodynamic therapist because something about that way of working appeals to me. So I think it offers individuals a lot more of what appeals to them within one framework, which I don't think is available, in other theories. So I would say that's one very good reason.
That is actually one of the best reasons that I see, that within TA, there are so many pockets that I can draw upon CBT if the client needs it and I feel it will be helpful. And no one in the community or even in the theory would, bat an eye that why are you doing, why aren't you not stringent in your ways? Not at all. There is so much space for collaboration within the field itself.
Philosophically, transactional analysis is very humanistic. And of course, from its theoretical conception, is highly psychodynamic. And of course, in its methodology and its outcome-based approach, it is very, very cognitive behavioral.
Absolutely.
True. That actually gives us one very that strength of transactional analysis to amalgamate the abstract with the pragmatic aspects of practice. It gives enough space for both of these elements. And then when it comes together, as a practitioner, it can really add so much value to the practice in itself. And as we're already talking about this, we're also touching upon some concepts like physis and ego states. All of these words have been brought in. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about some fundamental concepts of TA that form the foundation of this school of thought.
Okay, so when I think about TA, I think we also hinted upon it earlier. It has all theories and concepts that explains and helps us work with the whole spectrum of human life. Like as a theory of personality, we have the idea of the concept of ego states, where we say, we all have a consistent pattern of thinking and feeling corresponding to a consistent pattern of behavior. And these patterns are learned from our parents and parental figures, which we call as parent ego state. And some patterns are our own experiences in the past, in childhood and so on, which we call the child ego state. And many times it is also in direct response to the here and now reality, which we call as the adult. So the parent, adult, and child framework helps us to understand the individual, the personality. But also transactionalism is a theory of communication. In other words, theory of understanding the interpersonal gives us the concept of transactions. So when two people meet, it's not just two people meeting, but it's actually their whole set of parent, adult, and child ego states meeting. And that's what makes communication all the more exciting and challenging as well, because I still remember there is a model which talks about six people interacting when we are actually, when two people are talking. So transactions helps us to understand what is happening between people.
Right.
As a theory of motivation, it gives us the concept of strokes, which is, of course, my personal favorite, because it is a deceptively simple concept, but highly profound in its depth and scope of working, where we say all of us have this hunger.
Sorry, I want to pause you for a second. I want to understand more. But first, as you're explaining ego states and transactions, let's also give a little visual presentation to the listeners. Yeah, because as you are talking, I'm definitely drawing some figures in my mind. Yeah. So how I like to describe it to my friends is, imagine a snowman. A snowman has this one face circle, then that tummy, and then the bottom part, right? So three circular figures stacked on top of the other, touching each other, but not overlapping per se. And within those circles on the top, we say is the P or the parent. In the middle is the A or the adult. And on at the bottom is the C or the child. And these are the ego states that we're talking about, which come together to form the personality of any person. And
Beautiful.
yeah, and I was thinking a while back that why do we call them ego states as well? Because what I've observed is that in our community, mental health community, these words come very easily to us. But when we talk about people outside, it can get quite confusing, ego states. Generally, we use ego in the terms of something negative, or this person has a lot of ego, or look at Surya talk and go on. That sort of a way, yeah. But ego as a word, it actually also came from the times of psychoanalysis, which basically meant the self, the self. So when we talk about ego states, we're basically saying your states of self, different parts of yourself. And those different parts of the self, according to transactional analysis, are these three states: your parent state, your adult state, and your child state. And this is present in every human being. So right now there are 9 that are interacting, 3 in me, 3 in Surya, 3 in Gunjan, right? And when we talk and decipher these interactions, like I'm talking to Surya, sometimes Surya is talking to Gunjan, Gunjan is talking to me, that is when what we call the interaction between different ego states, the transactions that are taking place, the stimulus and the response. Is that okay? Would you guys like to add or remove something from whatever I said?
You've done it very well.
Yes.
Thank you. Please give me a good reference as we go on. Yes, please go on.
And I'm just going to add to it. That's a stroke that we have exchanged in you asking
Exactly.
me, saying that no, you've done really well, or Surya saying, yeah, that's really beautiful, and that's really strokes, right? About the recognition of the other, and not just of what they do, but also of who they are. and how significant it is for us. It's a deep motive, right, for us to know that we impact others and others are impacted by us. And that's really how I think of strokes, is not to, okay, give me a stroke or don't give me a stroke, or I got a negative stroke, but really, do I impact the other? And am I impacted by the other? Because all our relationships are about that. And in absence of strokes, or in absence of knowing that I don't impact others or others are not impacted by me, it can be a very isolating experience.
Mhm.
And most of the things that we do, whether good or not so good, are really so that we can get strokes,
True.
right? As they say, I'd rather have a negative stroke than have no stroke at all.
Explain that, elaborate that a little bit, Gunjan, in
You
the
know,
concept of stroke and also connecting it with your experience with clients in psychotherapy.
yeah. Um, I always think of it like this, the saying, right? I don't know the exact one, but I think it goes something like this. Love is good. Hate is also okay. It's the indifference which kills people. Yeah, because hate is also some stroke. I know I'm mad something. You may hate me, but you think about me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's important for us as human beings to know that somebody out there is thinking about. And it goes back to think about it as a baby, whose first experience of, the other is through the physical touch. The language isn't developed. Baby has no, it's not recognizing anything. It has no sense of self and no self. But it recognizes the touch, right? So the strokes then become very important. It is very important. In absence of them, we can die, right? And die is not like, for a baby, yes, in absence of being taken care of, you can physically die. But for us as grown-ups, think about it. If you had to, COVID did that to us. It deprived us of strokes. We were all cut off from people who mattered to us. We didn't know what to do. I think a lot of the challenges we faced were because we were so stroke deprived.
Mhm.
So that's the significance of strokes, really in development and in psychotherapy.
True,
Yeah.
true. I'm thinking from perspective of how a lot of times I've noticed in my practice when clients who fall sick quite often, they come in and they talk about it very fleetingly. And yes, I remain sick. I've gone through these many surgeries, XYZ. When I try to dig deeper into their past, in their childhood, in their relationship with their primary caregivers, be it parents, grandparents, what I've discovered is that one primary caregiver or two were quite distant and indifferent to their existence. Yes, on the face of it, they were being taken care of materially, all of that financially. But emotionally, there was so much deprivation that the only time they got that recognition or stroke when they fell sick, and not just sick like cold or cough, when they were literally on the bed with burning with fever or were admitted to the hospital. And imagine how it still impacts an adult life that they carry that feeling. It influences a lot of how we interact and seek love and care from others. It's like a programming that gets registered in our mind. And that was really eye-opening for me, that how a seemingly simple concept of strokes can form the entire life and personality of a person.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm wondering while I'm saying this, if Gunjan, you can bring in another theme from psychotherapy or even Surya from organizational perspective. How do you see the concept of strokes coming into play?
So I find stroke in organizational context is used extensively to promote emotional intelligence and also to create a conducive work atmosphere, especially when when you're dealing with low morale issues and so on, or when you're talking about recognition and rewarding mechanisms. So, for example, how is it used in emotional intelligence? Primarily, what is emotional intelligence? Is primarily being aware of yourself your needs and that of the other, and then finding ways of empathetically engaging with the other to build, an empowering relationship. And stroke exactly does that. And in fact, in many organizations, we have had, stroking circles, power of strokes workshops, and so on, principally to build that habit of recognizing each other. Because eventually, what is stroke? Stroke is a unit of recognition. Stroke is anything that provides stimulus and recognition to us. And in organizations, we need that because we are talking about humans. So principally, when you're talking of people systems, that stroking is a powerful way of building any relationship, but specifically to bring in, rewards, recognition, and emotional intelligence in people. And not only as an add-on, one-off processes, but much of, my organizational developmental work is to create a culture of stroking.
Is there a particular, sorry, Gunjan, I'm just checking in with Surya that in your vast work in corporates, what have you noticed about some patterns around strokes in companies?
As Gunjan was saying, taking on from the principle, one of the important principles in stroking is negative stroke is better than no stroke at all. And most of the corporate culture is built on, promptly giving negative strokes. To generalize what generally happens, most of the workplaces is when things are going and people are doing what they're supposed to do, nothing is talked about because it's taken for granted. Because that's what you're paid for. That's what you're expected to do. So
Sounds like an Indian household.
Yeah, it's similar cultures. We get derived. Corporate cultures are built on national cultures. So, and it's universal in many ways. That's what I'm noticing more and more. And therefore, if you want any recognition, you need to perform only extraordinarily. And that is one of the reasons why many industries burnout is setting in very early nowadays. Jokingly, we say, if we don't get a kiss, we look for a kick. So when I'm doing my normal work and I'm not getting any recognition, then what do? I end up in doing things which will get me at least negative strokes. So I'll start coming late. I will, not complete jobs on time. I will make a lot of mistakes. I will take a lot of leave. I will get, I will absent myself, or I will pretentiously fall sick, or I may really fall sick because I'm so stroke deprived that unconsciously we all, get into this forced rest in form of falling sick. Therefore, one of the important things that we need to do, which I call as to rehumanize the workplace, is to develop a healthy habit of stroking people. So I find it fascinating because, as I said earlier, it's deceptively simple, but deeply profound.
Yeah, I like that, deceptively simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And many of the TA concepts are like that, especially the names of these concepts could be very, very deceptively. We talk of rackets, games, strokes, transactions, taken in from
like a child's play.
They're taken from day-to-day usage.
Yeah.
Okay, for that matter.
Making it accessible.
Yeah,
Making it
accessible.
understandable, so that people can again access their own power to use some of this. And from a psychotherapy perspective, Soumya, you were asking how strokes. So obviously, from what Surya shared, the significance of it. My thinking is that the act of coming to see a psychotherapist or a counselor itself is an act of seeking strokes. Yeah, just that sense that there is somebody there who will, at least, if nothing else, listen to me. At the very least, see me for that 1 hour, because maybe there is nobody else out there who I can talk to, who can understand me, or who sees what I'm going through.
Yeah, that's such an important perspective. And sometimes that is what makes me feel so honored about my profession, that for that person, I am the only other person in the world who's able to listen and make them feel that, yes, you're heard, you're seen, you're important, you're valued. Extremely, extremely important. Which, even as strokes, sometimes the concept of strokes can be mistaken for coming only from the child ego state. There are children want recognition, which kind of an adult wants, but no, all the ego states, the P, the parent, the adult, and the child, we can ask for strokes from all the ego states. Yeah, yeah. And very important as of now also, that sometimes initially in TA, I thought that the child part is something which is only alive till one point, till we're 18, or like, no. When it comes to ego states, all the three are very much alive till the time we're here on earth.
Yeah, that's a misconception, and it's also something that at least we have to make sure that people get it, that it's got nothing to do with chronological order. He just used these words as, Berne just used these words as metaphors.
Right.
In that common example of map is not the territory. So when he used parent, he didn't mean a parent, but he meant parent-like.
Parent-like.
When he said child, he didn't mean a child. I mean, three of us are not children here, but there is a part of me which feels like a child. Which was there at the time of when I was born. And it will be there when I will die. So he just used these as metaphors, and I think it's important to keep that in mind, that these are indicative of what he meant when he said parent ego state or adult or a child. They're not chronological in that sense, and they don't refer to if it's a child ego state, then it must be something to do with children. No, not really.
Yeah, it's more like if you have to understand taking what's happening between the three of us in the moment. Or, when Gunjan, you said, I explained it wonderfully. So probably I saw that as coming from an adult who found something fascinating in what I said in the here and now, or the way I explained it. And in response, if I look at it as transaction, I responded from my child ego state, that free person that's like, oh yeah, please give me a reference as I go back. Yes. It doesn't mean like I suddenly become a child, but it is childlike. And that these are the things that we're saying are just small examples that we can pick up on in different types of settings, in educational, organizational, psychotherapy, to understand a lot about what is going on within yourself and the other through transactional analysis. Perfect. So we're talking about the professional perspectives, but TA in itself, even during training, it emphasizes so much on the self. I know that the 8,000 word diploma that I was mentioning, one big question of it is on self-development. And every part of it is focused on how you utilize TA in your own life, and then you look outside in your different types of clients and people you're working with, right? So I'm curious to know, Gunjan and Surya, that what TA concept has been significant in your personal life? Please take your time. I know I put you on the spot.
It's a hard pick.
Well, at the same time, I think I'm going to start with what I said 20 years ago in my CTA exam. More than a particular concept, I think it's the fundamental philosophy that all are okay is the most significant thing for me. Because it's closely tied to the fact that all human beings deserve dignity and respect. And therefore, for me, that is very important. And as I grew in my application and learning, it is combined with the concept of physis I was referring to earlier. So therefore, even in my work, I emphasize a lot on how to tap into that life force that is there in all of us, which is in a way common for all of us.
Hmm.
Because a sense of okayness comes from that common spirit of humanity that we all share. And that's why the TA also lent itself to evolve into a framework of spirituality. There's a whole lot of authors who have written on TA in spirituality as well.
Mhm.
And all this could be done at the mundane day-to-day life level. And how I transfer it to a day-to-day level is we are just now talking about strokes and ego states. I don't have to do something extra or extraordinary in order to stroke another person.
Mhm.
Whenever I am communicating or transacting with another, we are exchanging strokes. Because a transaction is an exchange of two strokes, a stimulus and a response. So that's why, it ties up beautifully with what you said, that we can stroke each other from all our ego states. Whether we are conscious or not, we are constantly stroking each other.
Mhm.
So therefore, for me, if I'm mindful of how I am relating with another person in the here and now, then that gives me a very grounded way of practicing okayness.
Yeah. That's
So I don't even have to think about parent, adult, child, and so on. I
yeah.
need to focus on, am I stroking this person in an okay manner?
Mhm. Yeah, of course, sometimes people think that psychologists are always analyzing and thinking. We're not. We don't want to. But eventually it starts becoming an automatic part of you. Like you said, the stroking, it starts to come very authentically from the inside. Yeah, and so nice you said that it ties into spirituality, because while you were describing this vices and everyone everyone is okay, Buddhism was coming to my mind, a lot of concepts of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting. What about you, Gunjan?
Yeah, I'm like Surya, I don't have a concept I can pick and say that's a favorite, but I think it's in similar lines as what Surya was saying. Uh, I was just writing um, a note for one of the TA colleagues is writing a book, and they just wanted a review of a chapter. And I was writing that. I remember writing in that this whole idea of okayness is a very old Vedantic idea in some sense, or a Buddhist idea, and I wrote about it in that. So it is very core to us as who we are as humans. Right?
The loving kindness part.
Yes, and the see, you cannot practice I'm okay, you are okay without some compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you said Buddhism, I'm like really saying to me, a core tenet of Buddhism is the compassion. Yeah. How can I think of other as they are okay without having some compassion for them? And I mean, refer to it, Soumya, that it also allows us to think about the social context and the political context or the cultural context. And I can't help but say that given what's happening in the world around us, really, if we could live by this philosophy of I'm okay, you are okay, maybe it would be a better world,
Yeah.
where I'm not constantly trying to prove somebody is not okay just because of their religion, their caste, their race, their color, their sexuality.
And
So
they are okay as well.
yeah, they are okay. That's what I'm saying. That if it offers us something to stop this othering process that we see being a big part of our context today. So for me, that's where the draw of TA lies, in the frame that it gives us to look at ourselves and others.
Having said that, I would also like to add, in fact, I would like to rush so that people don't think that, oh, it's a very spiritual and, you need to be religious in order to practice TA and all that. I'm fascinated by so many of the mundane concepts. I would call them mundane concepts because they have more to do with, how do I analyze day-to-day situations, how do I analyze my client context and so on. For example, the idea of games is quite fascinating. It's such a dynamic concept. It helps us to understand our life patterns. especially the dysfunctional life patterns, because there are times, having said all about the positive aspect of TA in terms of TA as a positive psychology, practically it also needs needed at times to look at what is not working, needs to be fixed. So games provides a beautiful framework to understand the dynamics that happens not only at the interpersonal level, but also at a systemic level, as a group level, how we enter into conflicts and how do we collect all those negative payoffs at the end of the processes, and how we get so addicted to these repeated negative experiences. So that is also a very fascinating concept for me to have, understand phenomena and also plan interventions and bring about change.
True. Very true. I was thinking about symbiosis. How we talk about codependent relationships, toxic relationships. They're all over the internet. Instagram, you open it, and every second person, be it from pop psychology or actual, they're writing about it. And symbiosis as a concept, and TA talks about it and really gets into the depth of it, how it develops. Why do we remain in such situations? What needs are being fulfilled, and how can we eventually break free from it to remain in healthy dependency relationships, but not that toxic ones? So these are such beautiful concepts that TA bring in that can help in the professional setup as well in the personal ones, right? Very, very interesting. I'm sure you guys have a lot more to share, but for today, as we're also starting to wrap up our conversation, one last question that I have is, what is something about TA that I should be asking you, but I haven't so far? I love this question.
Well, top of the mind, I think what you haven't asked us about is the TA conference that's happening in September. Yes, and I have to take this opportunity to talk about this.
Yes.
So we are having this international conference, the SATA 7th Biennial Conference in Bangalore on September 23rd and 24th. And we are expecting about 200 delegates to come from different parts of India, sure, and outside. The theme is mental health for this conference. And it's again, I think when I think about the theme now, it's Hegidera. How are you? Really just initiating dialogues again, because the belief is when we talk to each other, then we can, explore and reflect together and make meaning together. So yes, I hope those who will listen to this podcast are excited enough about TA to come. There are fascinating keynote speakers. We have somebody coming from UK. There's a very eminent doctor, psychologist who's coming from Calcutta to do the keynotes. And some 25 panel discussions over 2 days. So really, it's a very fascinating place to come together and experience TA. I would say, not read about it, not listen through a podcast, but really to come and experience. I think, that's one thing.
Yeah, soak in the TA energy.
Yes. But there's something else I have, but let Surya go first, and then maybe I will say, I would really answer your question, what you were asking. I just jumped in to talk about the conference.
No, it's very important, and thank you for bringing it in, because it's a very nice introduction to TA without having to sign up or commit to anything. To listen, all of these speakers who've been in the field for such a long time. Both of you will be there. I will be there for sure. So meet the people. How do you feel in the community? What you want to take from it?
Yeah.
And that is exactly a couple of things that came to my mind. Of course, the first thing is the community that Transactional Analysis has built. And SATA is a representation of part of the community. So I think that is something exciting, where now, apart from conference, we also have, through the year provide webinars, and we have a journal to which people could read and write and learn more about currently what is happening in TA theory and application and so on. The other thing which I would like to emphasize is through the session, this discussion, we were talking principally about psychotherapy and organizational application of TA. But as Gunjan initially said, TA formal learning and certification is available in 4 fields. Apart from psychotherapy and organization, there is also educational and counseling field, wherein many coaches and teachers and educationists also benefit and could get certified. Now, that is another element that I would like to emphasize and highlight, and would invite people to consider.
Right. And the other thing I thought may be helpful for the listeners of your podcast, Soumya, is about TA training and certifications. So maybe a quick one on that really is that, TA 101, as we call it, is the foundational course, which is a 2-day course. And you can do it with any of the certified trainers who are certified to do a TA 101 course. And that's also a good primer, really. You don't have to commit to a long drawn thing. You can do a 101, experience it for yourself, and then, get into longer training. There is the SATA certification, the diploma, which, as you said, you are going to write. And then there is the certification from ITAA or IATA, the international boards, IBOC, to become a certified transaction analyst in whatever is the field of specialization that you wish to do. And that training could take anything from that certification, and training is usually 3 to 5 years. So it is an in-depth training. Yeah. There's loads and loads of hours of training that you need, applications, supervision. We are constantly working in supervisions. Each of us, even the ones who are certified, will still be working with supervisors. Yeah. There is a strong code of ethics that governs TA. I think we can't have this podcast without really talking about the ethical framework that we all adhere to, which guides our practice in whatever field that we are in. And one can read more about it on SATA website and ITA website, which I think is very important in our context, where we don't have governing bodies for mental health field. For us as a community of practitioners to have these standards that we abide by, and we hold each other accountable. So I think that those 2 things about TA, I thought were important to share.
Very important. And can you also let the listeners know where they can find out the details for the conference, as well as the TA 101s or any other upcoming webinars and trainings?
SATA website is the place, and all of SATA's social media handles. So SATA is there on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. So yes, anyone can, access any of these, and there will be so the brochures are up there, information on the conference is up there, information about TA is there, and as and when TA 101s happen, you will find the information on the SATA website.
Perfect.
SATA as SAATA.
Yes, I will also link it in the show notes so that anyone who wants to access it can just click
That
and
would be
go
nice.
there.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. So as a closing note, I really want to thank both of you for coming in today, contributing your time. I have definitely learned a lot myself, and my love for tea has only increased. Thank you so much. And is it okay if someone wants to reach out to you? If you can just lay out what services do you personally provide and where can they reach out to you?
Thank you, Soumya. You have been a wonderful host. Of course, such a pleasure in this conversation with you. As I mentioned earlier, I provide organizational training, coaching, counseling, and facilitation consultancy services. And of course, they can contact me either by email or through WhatsApp. And also my website is relationswork.in.
I will link all of that in the show notes as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. What about you, Gunjan?
Yes. And as Surya said, I also want to say it's been absolute pleasure. It's really been a very involved conversation. And I think you've held the space as the convener really, really very well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Also for creating the space for us to come and share about TA and just talk about it. I think, like you said, it reignites something, it energizes one. So I've had a wonderful time. I, of course, have a private practice in psychotherapy. So I see clients one-on-one in practice, and I also run groups. So if anybody is looking for that, they can reach out to me. And for organization consulting work, I do leadership consulting, leadership development, OD and change interventions, and coaching. So those are the services that if someone is looking for, I'm available on LinkedIn, and of course my email or phone, anything is okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I hope many more people get inspired and fascinated by the field of TA, and they come in and we're all growing together. And it's very nice to see new people coming in, fresh perspectives also rolling in. Lovely. Thank you so much, Gunjan. Thank you so much, Surya. Have a good day.
Thank you, Soumya, and good luck with your future podcast as well.
Thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you feel this will help someone else as well, do share it with them. And don't forget to follow the podcast for more updates. Thank you.